Hey everybody, it is Carmen Chloe, the creator of Redefining Widowhood and the author of From Chaos to Clarity, How His Death Birthed Her Purpose. So in today's video, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to read an excerpt from my new book, From Chaos to Clarity, How His Death Birthed Her Purpose. And you can get more details about the book on my website, carmenchloeglobal.com. So let's get started. This is a bit deep. It may stretch you spiritually, but this is a part of my story and a part of how my husband's death birthed my purpose. And for those of you who don't know, I've been widowed for 2 years now. I have two beautiful children, and I am in the process of learning to live again after great loss. I've grieved, I'm healing, and in this year, I declare that I'm going to live. So I want to share a piece of my heart and share a snippet of the book with you. And you can pick up the book. You can pick up this book from carmenchloeglobal.com. Chapter 2, Premonition. A premonition is defined as a strong feeling that something is about to happen, especially something unpleasant. In the form of a dream, a premonition is an ability to gain information about an upcoming event prior to the event happening. These dreams are not common, and not all dreams serve as premonitions. When my oldest daughter was just a few weeks old, I had my first premonition dream about my husband. We were not yet married and were shacking up, as the church folks say, in his luxury apartment in Buckhead, Georgia. In the dream I had about him almost 9 years ago, he died. I remember feeling extremely sad, shocked, and almost lost without him. When I awoke from the dream, I could still feel the sadness as if it had really happened. Initially, it bothered me, but I shook it off as just a dream. Back then, I was not nearly as deep into my spiritual walk and spiritual knowledge as I am now. I had no idea that when you are dreaming, you are literally in a realm, the spiritual realm, where things are real. Also, I had no knowledge of intercession or praying warfare prayers to block things in the spirit. Many people are ignorant as to how real the spiritual realm is. When something happens in the natural or real world, it is a manifestation of what has already happened in the spiritual realm. The dream that I had about my then boyfriend and baby daddy, later turned husband, was the first of a series of premonitions and premonition dreams that I would have over the years. If I were to be honest, I always had this unsettling feeling that my husband would leave the house one day and never come back. He used to have this really bad habit of leaving the house to run to the store or to the gas station somewhere close by and not saying anything to me if he was already outside or in the garage. I would always tell him not to do that, but I never told him it was because if something happened to him, I would not know what to tell the authorities or his family. However, that is always what I was thinking in the back of my head when I had to remind him not to leave the house without letting me know where he was going. 2 months after we had our first daughter, we ended up moving into our brand new home. It was definitely a fresh new season for us. We had just had a new baby, moved into our first home together, and we got married 6 months after that. The honeymoon phase that newly married couples gloat about is what we experienced those first few years in our new home with our new baby embarking on our new life. During our time in our home is when I had my second premonition dream about my husband. One night, while in a deep sleep, I dreamed that there was a man in our backyard just outside of the storm door. When I got a closer look at the guy, he had a gun in his hand and he was training the gun on the door. Even in my dream, I knew that the man was specifically looking for my husband. Naturally, the dream shook me and had me wondering what was going on for me to be having that type of dream. I never shared this dream or the very first one that I had with my husband. In 2014, just a few short months after I gave birth to our second daughter, I witnessed my husband have his first sickle cell crisis. It was a very unsettling experience for me, especially considering the fact that he only told me that he had the sickle cell trait. He never told me that he got sick and experienced what is called a sickle cell crisis. Since I had no prior knowledge about sickle cell, the trait, or the disease, I had no idea that there was a difference or how it all really worked. He had just gotten back from working a truck driving job. The route that he had to take getting to the job was high up in the mountains and it was cold. Something about the altitude and the climate triggered his crisis. I pleaded with him for 2 days to let me take him to the hospital. The first day and a half, he refused and insisted on staying in the bed and having me care for him. I could tell he was in pain, but he was still laughing and joking with me, so I didn't really understand the severity of what was going on. Again, I had no real knowledge of sickle cell. By the time that I was finally able to get him to the hospital after him being home for 2 days in a crisis, his health had declined. The doctors informed me that he was in a full-blown sickle cell crisis, had blood clots in his lungs, and he had pneumonia. As a result, he had to stay in the hospital for a week. After he was released from the hospital, he was on a blood thinner for over a year. Once he was out of the hospital and things were getting back to somewhat normal, I remember him telling me that he was in so much pain those 2 days that he was in a crisis at home. In fact, he said to me, "Man, y'all could have put me in the ground and sent me to Jesus." To know that he was in that level of pain, yet still not wanting to go to the hospital, was mind-boggling. He later shared with me that being in crisis felt like somebody was stabbing him. From the outside looking in, it appeared as if he could not breathe during the moments where the pain seemed to be at its worst. I remember telling him after that first crisis that I thought he was much wiser than to jeopardize his health and life by not wanting to go to the hospital, considering that he had me and his daughters to think of. He just sat quietly and took in what I was saying because he knew I was right. That first experience with him in crisis was extremely scary and a reality check on his mortality. 3 years after his first crisis, after our neighborhood began to change for the worse, we decided to sell our house and we moved into an apartment. The plan was to stay there for no longer than a year and purchase a home in the neighborhood that we rented the apartment in because it was nicer than the area we moved from. A year after living in the apartment is when I had my third premonition dream. By the time, I had grown in my faith, knowledge of God, and the spiritual realm. One afternoon while I was fasting, I decided to take a nap. During the few days that I fasted, I took afternoon naps, and each day I would have a dream. However, this dream was different. I had a dream that my late husband's cousin was calling our house phone. In the dream, I kept thinking, why is she calling our house phone? I told my late husband about this dream. We were sitting on the couch one late night after watching a movie, and I shared the dream with him. His response to the dream was, "Oh God, every time she calls, it's because someone had died." Still, I thought nothing of it. Now that I think back on it, it was odd that that was his response. Not because that was not what the dream meant, but because he talked to this cousin frequently, and most times it was not because someone had died. The same cousin who was calling the house in my dream is the one who called me and told me to get to the hospital when my husband passed. That's just a brief excerpt of chapter 2, Premonition, and there's more to this chapter. The final premonition or impression, I guess you will, that preceded my husband's sudden and untimely death. So again, this book is not only my story of how I suddenly became widowed, but it's a story of tragedy, triumph, pain, purpose, chaos, and clarity. And it's also a self-help guide for other widows who unfortunately find themselves on this journey and need to figure out how to navigate life in the midst of chaos and to have the audacity to get to a place of clarity so that you can grieve, heal, and live again. Again, I am Carmen Chloe. You can pick up the book at carmenchloeglobal.com. Peace.